They want to argue about it, but they don't know how because they actually can't define their terms. My slogans that I write are for me too. You know, they're the stuff I need to hear. A lot of people are sitting at home watching the news, getting angry, trying to, what should we do about this thing? Your life's a wreck to start with. Why don't you fix your own life? Anyone's going to shape the world according to their own interests. And really, it's men's fault because they let them do it. You can't really divorce manliness from some kind of violence because that's what it comes from. And I think that if you're not talking about that, then you're lying a little bit. They've accepted a narrative that they're not going to be good at X, Y, and Z. Yeah, it's good to have the dudes who are just good at being men. They're handy, but it's better to have men who are good at being men who you can actually trust. This is Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men, and you are listening to The Wild Initiative.
Put down your latte and pull on your boots.
I would rest at peace for eternity if my legacy was that I made a positive influence on the non-hunting public about what hunters are and what hunting is.
I finally got my buck on our last real day of hunting.
So a pro-hunting organization is voting against hunting. And that says anti-hunting to me.
There was a year straight where I was averaging up to 200 death threats a day.
I hugged it like I just wanted to hug a bear.
It's proven that the average steak in a grocery store touches 50 to 100 hands and machines. And we're putting that into our body.
Hey y'all, Cable Smith, host of the Lone Star Outdoors Show here.
This is Adam Weatherby.
I'm Corey Jacobson with Elk 101.
This is Christy Titus.
Hey folks, this is John Barrett.
You're listening to The Wild Initiative.
Hey yo, welcome to episode 122 of The Wild Initiative. Before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to Sawyer Products for their continued support of the podcast. Y'all, if you are looking for the best in water filtration, insect repellent, sunscreen, and first aid, make sure y'all head on over to Sawyer.com. Check out Sawyer Products. I've been using their gear pretty much every single hunt I go on, and it is absolutely bulletproof. So make sure y'all check them out, Sawyer.com. Also, y'all, if you're starting a podcast or a brand, if you are an outfitter, a taxidermist, heck, even if you're a dentist or a burger joint, and you need a website, I want y'all to head on over to the website at thewildinitiative.com, click on the media tab, and there's an option there for website design, marketing, and branding. I want y'all to click on there, check out some of the work I have done, and fill out a quote request form. Y'all, my prices are super reasonable, and I guarantee you will walk away very happy with the end result. So y'all head on over to the website, check out my marketing, branding, and website design services, and let's get you set up with the new website. All right, y'all, getting on to today's episode. I am doing it again. I'm throwing you for a bit of a loop because this episode is really not at all directly related to hunting. Now, hold on. Before you skip this episode and jump to a new show, I genuinely think you're going to find this episode really interesting. Y'all, I love to do a lot of reading, and I had an author recommended to me by a good buddy. The author's name is Jack Donovan, and he writes a series of books, but the one he's most known for is called The Way of Men. Y'all, and this is a really interesting book. It really puts a voice to a lot of the issues that we see in our culture today related to the decline and the vilification of masculinity. So, ladies, unfortunately, you may not quite get as much out of this episode as the guys will, but who knows? You may gain some special sort of insight into men and masculinity. Who knows? So, give it a listen. Jack is a very interesting guy, has a very unique perspective on things, and in his books has really put into words just a lot of the things that I've been noticing and I've been feeling with regards to our culture. So enjoy episode 122 with Jack Donovan, author of The Way of Men. So another episode of The Wild Initiative. Jack, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
So really, I always like to start out maybe just the quick introduction of kind of who you are. And typically, I ask people to give their introduction to how they got their start into hunting or the outdoors, but that's something I actually want to bring up a little bit later. So maybe just a quick introduction of kind of your background and who you are.
My name is Jack Donovan. I am an author. My most well-known book is titled The Way of Men. I started writing about masculinity at least 10 years ago. I don't have a background that a lot of my readers do. I have a lot of readers who are in the military and law enforcement and so forth. I went to art school. But I think that allows me a different perspective. I can kind of see things from 1,000-foot view. And so I see the world in a little bit different way. And as an artist and that kind of person, I gravitate towards archetypes and big concepts. So that led me to write The Way of Men as I started realizing that masculinity was something that was being treated in a really negative way in society, and that something was being lost. And so that's why I started writing The Way of Men and writing about all this. And now it's how I make my living, which is bizarre.
I found out, we were talking earlier, and I found out about your book through a good buddy of mine, Jacob Herman, who lives out in Nashville. And he suggested I read it. And one of the things I love about digging into your book is you really define a lot of the issues that I think people see but can't really, put voice to in a coherent way, to where you're like, okay, yeah, there's these attacks on masculinity. There's this direction you see the world going, but I don't really know how to define that in a concise manner. And you do that so well in the book. And I'm kind of reading through it, and I'm sitting there, I'm going, yeah, no, that's exactly how I've been feeling. And you really kind of define that. And it really kind of speaks to me, the whole book. And a lot of your background too is because I hang out with a lot of guys that are in the military, law enforcement, a lot of that group of guys. But I mean, I'm like a comm design major. I've been a computer nerd my whole life. And I think I told you earlier, I used to run Dungeons and Dragons games when I had the time before doing all this stuff. And so
I saw a fantastic meme yesterday that said, and this will probably upset people, but that fantasy football is just Dungeons and Dragons for people who are not good at fantasy or football. so you're just better at fantasy. That's all.
I love it. I honestly, I think D&D is awesome. And I've actually talked to a lot of like these super just gnarly dudes, like hardcore guys. Yeah. And I've kind of described to them what it actually is. And I swear, if I asked any of them on air, they deny it till the day they died. But when we were over a drink, to sit there talking, like, dude, that sounds really cool. So you mean like I can just play this big ass barbarian and do whatever the hell I want? I'm like, yeah, it's just literally whatever you want to do. You're creating a character and playing it. And I think, you're talking about, you like those archetypes. And I think that's so much of what a lot of these fantasy novels and things are about are those archetypes in the world. So maybe for those who aren't familiar with the book, maybe give a little more, in-depth just a description of what The Way of Men really is about.
Well, as you said, people sense that there's some kind of issue about masculinity, and they hear all kinds of messages through the media and so forth. And the problem is that they want to argue about it, but they don't know how, because they actually can't define their terms. And, they can't really articulate what masculinity is. They would just want to say, hey, that's wrong. It's not like that. But they can't really dig into where it's coming from. So what I looked at what masculinity has been all throughout civilization. And a lot of people want to say that it's been different everywhere, so that it doesn't mean anything. But if you look at that's all the superficial details change. Like, are you wearing a caftan or a kilt or armor or whatever? Those things change, but there are certain things that have always been the same, and always and everywhere. No one ever says that man who is weak is more masculine than the man who is strong. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's always and everywhere, always true. I don't care if you're in India. I don't care if you're in Asia. I don't care where you are. And the same thing is with all the other tactical virtues that I define in the book. And the reason why I think that we care about being men is because we've always, for most of our evolutionary history up until very, very recently, we've been hunting in survival bands. And we needed to assess our peers and force them into a mold where they could function with us, or you're going to have to be back at the camp with the women or get the hell out, because you need these guys to be able, you need to be able to depend on these guys. And what's been really gratifying is when I go out and I talk to shooting instructors and guys who have seen combat and so forth, they start saying the same things that I'm saying in The Way of Men. I just came up with this stuff in my head and worked it out from looking at literature and so forth. But they're teaching people in, firearms classes. They're teaching tactical drills, and they're like, you have to pay attention. And this is why, because you can get this guy killed. And this is, you have to be ready to back this guy up, because if you don't, then everybody else, it's all these things that I've said that men have always evaluated each other by. They're true in an emergency. And that's why we have this idea of masculinity. And that's why we have the need to assess each other and also to be recognized as being masculine, because it's part of our personal value. We have value as a man. Women have value in other ways without doing anything. Men just want women no matter what they do, but they have other ways of providing value. Like if you're a man and you're not carrying your own weight, people are looking at you like, what's wrong with you? So
it's, there's some funny things you brought up. There's something you said that reminded me of one of the things that really struck me in the book. You talked about there's a difference between being a good man and being good at being a man. And you talked about you were talking about, okay, nobody has ever said a strong man isn't manly, kind of a thing.
Right.
And I always thought, because it's such a, nobody wants to look at these kind of villains throughout history, these big, gnarly, crazy dudes and be like, oh yeah, those are men right there. You don't want to say that, but you look at it and you can't deny the fact that those are men. Like, they were awful people, but they're men.
And rationally true. They're objectively and rationally manly. And the thing is, and that's what's interesting about it, is that it's because we have this primal desire to be seen as men and to have other people who are not in our group be seen as, they always say in war, you have to dehumanize the enemy. But if you can emasculate them, also even better. So anyone who's on the other side becomes not a real man. So if you're not doing what you're told by your group, that's a really good way to manipulate men too. If you want them to behave in a certain way, all you have to say is, pussy if you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Like all you have to say is you're not a real man unless you do this thing. And you have to really know yourself to evaluate when you're just being used and when maybe you need to man up a little bit.
Yeah,
there is a difference, and it's easy to push that button on a lot of men, especially if they aren't confident in their own masculinity.
Well, another interesting thing that relates to that is how you talk about being a man isn't about how you're seen by women or the world in general. I mean, it's literally about your interaction with other men. That's what being a man is about. And forgive me if I totally massacred that phrasing, but
no.
It's really about, how other men see you. It's not about so many other things. That's how we define a lot of being a man. Did I phrase that correctly?
Yeah. Men create other men. Men define masculinity. That is not something that women can do. And a woman cannot provide masculinity for you. And that's a mistake that men often make. And the idea that if I just find a woman, then she'll make me a man. And that's not how that works. And also, then if she decides she doesn't like you anymore, now you're not a man anymore. And that's also a problem. So you get your masculinity, and also really you're a man in a vacuum if you aren't tested against other men. You have your own idea of your manhood, which you could inflate to being quite fantastic, but you don't. If you go out and test that masculinity against the masculinity of other men, you may find that it is not so fantastic after all. And maybe you need to do a lot of work. You know, I have to force myself out into situations that I would much rather be at home, you know, in many cases, you know, but you have to go out and push yourself to do a thing, and it makes you better. You know, it makes you better and it makes you more confident because you've gone out and overcome something. I mean, I can tell you this. I mean, I probably shouldn't tell anyone this, but on Thursday, I got choked out. Like I went to sleep, like for the second time in jiu-jitsu. And I've only really been doing it for about 4 or 5 months. So that feels like a lot. That feels like too many times, you know, but I also fight really hard and I'm a big guy. And so people push back really hard against me. I'm not like someone you feel sorry for and just move around. You know, big guys want to go hard with me and I don't want to give up. So I'll fight chokes and stuff like that. And, but you know, I went to sleep the other day and the first time I was like, oh, whatever that happens. Second time I was like, you know, a little bit of that, you know, the same kind of when I got knocked out. I've been knocked out a couple times in boxing. And, you know, after that happens for a little bit, you're like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. You know? You're like, I can just go to sleep at any time. What's going to happen? But, you know, you have to overcome that. And last night I went into my jiu-jitsu place and it was a different place. I go to 2 different places. And this I didn't have anyone to roll with, and I just told my instructor that I had gotten choked out recently, and so then the black belt wants to roll with me, and I'm just like, I'm not really ready for that right now. I'm not feeling in my head. I'm like, I'm maybe not. You know, like I'd rather roll with someone easy right now because I'd like to just get my feeling back of going. But, you know, he's like, no, I know what happened here. We'll just work on some shit, whatever. And so I rolled with him, and then I went a little harder with the next guy. And, you know, you have to, if you don't put yourself into a situation like that where you're just a little scared for a minute, you're not going to grow. You're not going to grow at all. And, you know, I think that applies to almost everything. And I have to do that a lot of times. I wrote an essay. I'm not sure if it's an essay or not. Maybe it's in one of my books. I sell this thing called the Conflict by Rune, and one of the slogans that goes with it is life is conflict, peace is death. And I've had many times where I have to be like, all right, Jack Donovan, life is conflict. You know, because my slogans that I write are for me too. You know, there's the stuff I need to hear. So.
You know, it's one of those things where I feel like this is so applicable to so much of my audience because, you know, this is primarily a podcast about hunting, but it's one of those things, you know, especially a lot of the people that I reach out to are people that did not grow up with granddad walking around with granddad's gun in the backcountry. They might be from the city, or they may just have not been exposed to kind of like hunting and the outdoors and all of this stuff for their whole life, but they want to get into it for whatever reason. And so, I mean, you know, my first hunt 2 years ago, I went on, you know, I did one of the arguably most difficult hunts. I went on a solo backcountry archery elk hunt on public land. Just because I thought that I learned about that. Like I went in September, I learned about it for the first time in January of that year. And I was just like, this is legitimately the most badass thing I've ever seen in my life is archery elk hunting in the backcountry, and you go in solo. And I'm like, I have to do this. It may not be easy, but I have to do this because it's challenging. There's that element of danger. And that's something else you talk about is our minds crave that element of danger. And so I feel like what you're saying is so applicable to this audience is, you know, I've spent 30 years, you know, effectively living a sedentary life. I worked in an office. I did a few things outside now and again. I did jujitsu in high school for a little bit and a few things here and there. And I dabbled in them, and I always felt good, but I needed more. So I decided to go stretch myself and challenge myself and put myself in a little bit of danger. And it's completely changed my life and taken over my life since then. So I can definitely relate to that concept of, having to put yourself in those situations to really grow.
Yeah,
and
I mean, that's how you get to the next level, right? I mean, that's how you get to that's how you level up in your D&D game of life. I mean, that's how you get to the next level. You don't get to the next level by not overcoming anything, right? You have to overcome, this challenge to get to the next one, the harder one. And if you don't put yourself in challenging situations, you never grow. And I bet you're probably a more interesting person to talk to now than you were before you put yourself in those situations. And more people are going to seek you out, and more people are going to want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, I can imagine. And it's one of those funny things because it was a spectacularly unsuccessful trip. It wasn't just unsuccessful. Sure. It was like crash and burn. I tore the meniscus in both of my knees and had to call in a buddy to help pack me out and all of this crazy crap. And it's one of those things to where, you talk about overcoming these challenges. Overcoming doesn't necessarily mean being successful in that sense. It's making it through and going again. You got choked out, but
right.
You didn't say, you may have felt like saying, screw this shit.
Yeah. Maybe this isn't for me. Yeah,
exactly.
But, I saw this infographic. A lot of the military guys have this thing that goes around like, did you die? And it was, did you die? And if the answer was that you didn't die, then it was a good adventure. Did you die? No matter what happens, if you didn't die, it was a good adventure.
It's the stories I think are the best part. And you learn so much more from those times when you do get hit really hard. I mean, you learn stuff from success. You definitely do. But you learn so much more from those times you get hit and you then get back up and can learn to duck.
You learn what not to do. Yeah, you learn, I don't know how to do it that way again. I mean, that is where you get a little bit of the wisdom of age, I think, in men. There's a lot of things you can learn on the internet, whatever. But, if you've gone out and tried some stuff and screwed up a lot, you're a little bit more careful next time. That maybe you take a little more time preparing for that. Something like that. You'll make a little smarter choices, maybe.
So back to kind of talking about masculinity in general and where our society is heading. I think it's pretty evident. I don't think we really need to reiterate that, yes, there are attacks on masculinity in this society and kind of the direction things are heading. But what do you see as, and I don't know if there's a cut and dry solution, but maybe what are steps? What can someone do to help improve things? Maybe in the short term, what are some solutions for the long term? Where can we go with this? Well, I know that's a super loaded question too.
Well, I just think, saving the world is above my pay grade. I don't, and it's above most of our pay grades, to be honest. Everybody thinks, well, if we could just come up with a solution and get everybody on board, and that never happens. There's billions of dollars moving around. There's all kinds of interests that we don't even know about. And you have to deal with the things that you can influence in your own world. And that's been a big thing. My slogan that I go by has been start the world for a long time. And I think that you have to influence the things around you first and control your own environment, because a lot of people are sitting at home watching the news, getting angry, what should we do about this thing? Your life's a wreck to start with. Why don't you fix your own life? And then stop trying to run everybody else's life because you don't even know what you're doing yet. And I think that's, focus on yourself, focus on the people around you, and but also, be careful about where you compromise too much. I think that one of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm going to speak in Orlando in a month here, and one of the things that is really important to me is male spaces, and that's something that we've really lost, and it was intentional. It was intentional there. I mean, we used to have Elks clubs and all kinds of, I mean, we still do, but they're all integrated. Yeah. There used to be all these men's organizations where like, this is where men go. And really the workplace was a men's organization up until like, the 50s. And, that was an all male environment. So you got to go out and be a man and do all these things that I'm talking about in whatever way, whether it's in some corporate way or some other way, but you had to interact with men and play this little game with them, this little status hierarchy thing that you did. And then you could go home to your wife and relax and chill out. But now women are in that space and you don't really have the same opportunity to interact with men because that changes the environment. That changes the way that men interact with each other because they police their words differently and they change what's said and what's done. And so I think protecting male spaces and the guy who can stand up and say, you know what, this is actually a guy's thing. We're just going to go out. I don't care whether it's a hunt. I don't care if it's a bowling trip. I don't care what it is. But the guy who can say, no, this is just for the guys. And there's always going to be the one guy where like, if it was a hunting trip, there's going to be like, but my girlfriend's really good with a gun. Da, da, da. Well, that's great. But she will change the entire dynamic of the entire thing. And it's not because she's bad. And it's not because she's evil. It's just because men relate to each other differently when there are females present.
And you're not saying, it's not saying that, just to clarify, because I'll get emails.
Okay.
You're not saying that women shouldn't be out hunting. You're not saying that men and women can't do stuff together, can't go hunting together, can't work together, can't do any of this stuff. You're just saying guys need guy time to do guy things and be men together.
Yeah. I still have a career because I don't tell women what to do ever. I don't try to tell women what to do. It's a bad road to go down. But I do tell men what to do or would at least give them advice. And I think that you lose something if you don't have that guy time. And really the women lose it too, because men are better men when they're confident and they're proven and they have some kind of anchor and some relationship. As I said, we need that feedback from other men. And if they're not getting it, they're going to be just lesser men. And I think we're just spiritually more whole if we have that. And so I think that, I think you got to be the guy who defends that and sets aside that time for yourself, really. And one of the points I make, I think in the More Complete Beast, my kind of third book, there's more, but the third important book in the series is that all of, feminism in the modern world and so forth is set up so that women can live their best life. And when do men get to not live their best life then? That's that. If they're saying it's not zero sum, then don't make it zero sum.
Yeah.
If men also, that's what men need to be the best versions of themselves that they can be. And, I think that to take that away from them is taking away something that's really important. And you see it, and there's a lot of male depression and there's a lot of problems in society that I think are created because men don't know how to be men.
Well, you look at a lot of things like veteran suicide, even where there's a lot. I mean, and there's more to it than just this, but you have these guys that are in an environment where they are, to some extent, arguably like living the epitome of what it is to be a man 24/7, nonstop, all of that. Then suddenly they're thrust back into this society where all of their opportunity to live out their masculinity is removed. And they're not only is that opportunity removed, they're expected to completely shut it down 100%. And especially it's got to be even worse in today's society. And I mean, to some extent that has to contribute to that depression and those, that percentage of veterans that do commit suicide.
Absolutely. I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys that they always talk about transitioning them back into the regular world. Well, it's not a great world for them to transition back into. And, if you've been spending the last, 4, 8, 10, 12 years, learning how to kill people or defend space or however you want to talk about it. Learning how to provide excellent customer service is an entirely different mindset. And it's not, you get rewarded for things that you would be, that they're, the rewards that they're seeking are the exact opposite of the rewards they were seeking before. Hey, can you sit and be submissive all day? And not submissive in a yes, sir, now I'm going to go punch something or, shoot something or whatever, but in a, yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had that experience. That's their life now. And that's hard to transition. And so it's hard for them to find the right way to look at that. And also just the right job because they aren't their masculinity isn't valued in the same way.
It's, it's an interesting thing kind of you talk in the book, just literally about the differences in wiring between men and women. And, you look at the way the world's going, the way people are acting. And I think it's interesting because most people would start reading this book expecting you to like put fault on women for this or put fault on men. And you don't, you just say, it's like, okay, this is men. This is our nature. This is what we need and how we need to live. This is women and this is their nature. And of course they're going to try and, form society in their image. You're like, it's what you would expect them to do. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, no one, when you give people power, they don't want to give it away. Why would you do, they, of course, why would anyone's going to shape the world according to their own interests? And really it's men's fault because they let them do it. It's not women. Women aren't bad. They're the same they've always been. They're just they're going to put some curtains on the universe if you don't if you don't tell them not to.
Yeah, it's I thought that was I really appreciate your book because I think your perspective and how you come at things is very, I don't want to say neutral, but it's nature-based, fact-based. It's not like you're trying to demonize one side or the other or anything. And it's an interesting perspective, and it's very disarming when you I think when you come at the book and you're expecting one thing or the other. And so I really appreciated that in your writing.
Cool. Yeah. I just tried to be honest, but most of the books about masculinity that were written before that, now there's better, not better than The Way of Men, but there's better stuff that's come out, like the market is changing a little bit. And there's a lot of different guys talking now who weren't talking when I was writing that book. But a lot of the books that were written about masculinity before that book they like opened with an apology. They kept apologizing to women the entire way through. This isn't this, and this isn't that. And that's not a very masculine way to write a book because you're apologizing the whole way. That's not very assertive. But at the same time, by apologizing like that, it waters down their message, and it doesn't sound, like I said, it doesn't sound confident at all. And I think that men need to hear that message of confidence as well.
So who are maybe some of your heroes, some of the guys you admire that you think really embody masculinity? Who does Jack Donovan look up to?
Well, masculinity is its own thing. There's a specific set of qualities that I talked about in The Way of Men. So the guys who embody that are going to be very similar guys. They are going to be the guys who've done special forces. I mean, they're the people who are doing the job that I talk about in The Way of Men. They're going to be people who exhibit those qualities. Now, do I necessarily admire those guys in every other aspect of life? Not necessarily. Some of them are really cool. Some of them are just all around awesome dudes, and some of them probably aren't. But so I look to. There are other qualities I admire aside from masculinity. But as men, who embodies those characteristics. I mentioned them on different podcasts that maybe got put in the trash can or never aired or whatever for months because it was recorded months ago and never came out. It was a really big deal thing they flew me out for. But I mentioned him. I told him I did because I've met Josh Barnett, a few times, and he former UFC heavyweight world champion, catch wrestler, and all that stuff. I mean, that's a guy who's made his entire living being a man, doing manly things in conflict with other men. And I know other guys who do. I'm actually a professional fighter out of Salt Lake City, Josh Tyler, who also has podcasts and things like that. I mean, that's pretty cool. He also fights for a living and talks about all these things. So there are a lot of guys who do that kind of thing. And as far as fulfilling a manly role, I mean, you can't really divorce manliness from some kind of violence, because that's what it comes from. And I think that if you're not talking about that, then you're lying a little bit. And so masculinity, it has a root in violence, whether it's violence against nature, which is what your podcast is about, violence against nature, in some way. And,
it's the truth. It's the truth,
It's true, right? I mean, it sounds mean because we're so tuned to everything being child safe, but it's violence against you. You're going to kill things. Men who are doing that role of hunting and fighting. I mean, that's the traditional role of men, and not even traditional because that sounds programmed, but that's just the role that we're designed to do. And that we're designed to do that a little bit better than women. Not to say that we're always better than women at it in every single individual case, but generally speaking, that's where men excel. And that's where they have evolved to excel over all of human history, because it was their job.
You talk about so much of manliness, you can't be divorced with violence. And it's kind of funny. It's to some extent, it's pretty much embracing the arguments used against masculinity. And you talk about that, and it's pretty much you talk about masculinity in these cultures, but those cultures were like violent and brutish, and you're like, yeah, that's the point.
Also known as successful.
Yeah.
Those other cultures are talking about, they didn't win.
In other words, what other cultures? Because they didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Did not make it into the history books. They got one sentence, not a chapter.
There have been a lot of matriarchal cultures that have survived. I'm just saying.
Am I gonna have to put a trigger warning at the front of this podcast? Oh no.
I just feel like my face is a trigger warning at this point.
Oh man, this one will not be for the faint of heart. Oh well. Oh darn.
Yeah. Which is sad, because I'm pretty reasonable and not really saying anything.
I know.
Crazy, but
I know. It's
but that's just how the way the world is.
Hey, y'all, we're going to pause right here for just a minute, because I feel like an episode about masculinity is the perfect time to talk to you about the guys over at Live Bearded. Y'all, all through hunting season and generally the winter, I absolutely love to grow out my beard. The problem is, after a few weeks, I generally just start to look like a homeless guy. And let's face it, that does not help me at all with the ladies. And trust me, I need as much help as I can get. Well, y'all, cue the guys over at Live Bearded. They hooked me up with their newest line of product, and I'll tell you what, my beard has never looked better. I mean, I might even dare to say that I look ruggedly respectable. And y'all, my beard has never smelled better. We're not talking lilac and lavender here. We're talking manly, earthy scents like sandalwood, eucalyptus, and pine. And for those of y'all that want to make sure your beard's looking good for that grip and grin before you go out into the woods, they also have products that are completely unscented. And what's even better is that Live Bearded is giving away $10,000 in cash to do whatever you want with. Think about the amount of tags and gear you can buy with $10,000 in cash. Every $5 you spend at livebearded.com is an entry. And as a special deal for my podcast listeners, if you use code TWI10, you'll get 10% off your purchase. You also head on over to livebearded.com, check out their awesome products, get entered to win that $10,000, and make sure y'all use code TWI10 to get 10% off your order.
Good.
Anyway, I want to change gears a little bit, just because we were talking earlier about hunting, And you mentioned you are going on your first hunt this year, which is super exciting for me. I'm super excited to hear that. So I really want to hear about really how you kind of got introduced to hunting, and I really want to hear about you getting ready for your first hunt and where you're going and stuff.
Cool. Well, I don't know where we're going yet. We're going to sit and figure that out. We were going to do that the other weekend, but we never got around to it.
Well, what state are you going to be hunting in? What will you be hunting?
All my tags are in Oregon.
Okay, awesome.
As we talked a little bit earlier, and I am going out with my best friend Jesse, and I've known him for like a decade. And he always went out with his dad, but this year his dad's getting older, and he's like, I just want to go hunting. And so he said, hey, do you want to go? And I've wanted to go for years. I mean, obviously I wrote a book on manliness. It's on my list, but, and as we were talking about earlier, I didn't realize that this was kind of the theme of your podcast, is that, it's a big project, to do it by yourself. A lot of guys, I'll read guys who will comment on my stuff on Instagram or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, just go down and blah, 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 blah. No, you grew up with hunting all your life. Your dad took you out, your grandpa, your uncles took you out. You have land. You already know where the land is to shoot on. You're going to go to X place because that's where we go. We've always found that's where the deer are. You're going to borrow this guy's gun, or you've already had one, or you've been collecting them since you were 12. If you start from zero, it's a huge project. And so I just have never got into it for that reason, because I'm like, well, I didn't really feel like sitting and doing all the research. And I just figure at some point I'll get an opportunity in the way that, shooting guys kind of contact me, and I get to go and do that or whatever. And so I don't know if we'll get anything or not. I have, I think, deer and elk tags. And then he told me I needed to get bear and cougar tags. And I was like,
oh, yeah.
What? And he's like, well, in case we see one. And I was like, all right, that's fair. And so I have those. And so, he's going to let me borrow a gun. Cause I mean, they don't let you shoot that stuff with AR-15s, I guess. They frown on that. So he's going to let me borrow one of his rifles and so forth. And I think we're going to go out and find some public land, and just see what happens. It'll just be an experience to get set up. And then, maybe it'll be next year that I get something. I don't know, but I mean, it's a shame. I have, the funny thing is that, it's just the legality of things. I have 5 acres of land that I own in Washington. And every time I go out there, there are a whole family of deer crossing in front of my truck. But I don't think that, I don't even know how much it would cost for me to get tags there, whether I get some because I own property. I have to research all that as well. And, how I have to shoot them or whatever. I'd have to figure that out by myself, because I don't live in that state. So it's an out of state deal.
Oh, interesting. So this is just property you own in Washington. Yeah. But you're an Oregon resident.
I have a house in Oregon, but the land I own called Waldgang, it's kind of where I give talks and so forth. That's in Washington. So that's where it's like 5 acres. So and it's called, Goldendale is actually called a sportsman's paradise, because as the realtor told me when I was buying land there, she's like, they're like rats here. You can't. Deer are like rats. They're everywhere. I've seen them walk through the town, But so I mean, they're all around. But I think I'd have to figure out how to get tags to shoot them.
Yeah, let's see. I'm looking at it right now. A non-resident just for deer.
You're pulling it up.
Oh heck yeah!
Yeah.
Just for deer, non-resident deer license is $434.
I looked that one up with myself. I'm like, that's a little pricey. Yeah,
that's tough. For
that's
deer,
more than the taxes I pay on the land for the year. I think $500 for the taxes.
And it's always one of those crazy things to where every time I buy tags, I sit and I grumble and I get butthurt and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so freaking expensive to buy tags. But then also I know where that money's going, and it goes towards the benefit of wildlife. And so it's a lot easier of a pill to swallow than when I'm paying $4.50 a gallon for gas, or when I'm, having to watching that refund number drop in TurboTax when I'm when I'm filling out stuff. So I'm like, okay.
I haven't seen that happen in a long time. Yeah, it's but yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, I've known people, especially people pretty outdoorsy in Oregon and Washington. But I've known people who grumble about paying the whatever parking fees at the trailheads and stuff like that. I'm like, the government takes my money for things I hate so much more. Like maintaining this nice trail so I can go hiking.
I'm like, I'm gonna save my energy to hate those the government things. Does.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, the fish and game departments are pretty much the only government entities that I don't absolutely hate.
Right.
Oh man. It almost might be. I wonder what non-resident tags are for Oregon. It almost might be worth you switching it up and declaring residency in Washington on your other land.
There are all kinds of benefits to that, probably even tax benefits, but it's a very big project.
It starts getting real tricky,
But to move my business over there and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So when is your hunt? When are you guys heading out?
This fall, we kind of laughed about it, and I have to speak in Orlando in towards the end of October. So I think we're probably going to go after that because I have to kind of prep for that speech, and that's where my head has to be.
Yeah.
But when we get back, I thought there was a very small window, but Jesse's like, "No, we have till the end of the year." And I'm like, oh, "Okay, cool. We'll figure it out then." It's not a lot of pressure. So sometime probably like Halloween or after.
I gotcha. Well, I'm super excited. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the we talked a little bit about them, but what are some of the challenges you've really started recognizing as you've been preparing, getting ready for this hunt?
Well, I haven't done a ton of work yet. We were just honestly, even there are a lot of things that people don't really realize, even where to shoot a rifle. Because just getting a place with enough range. I think we talked about that a little bit, and that was actually my first thing. I brought my buddy Jesse up here the other week, and I asked the guys in town here because I've only lived in this small town for almost 2 years now, and I don't know where the place where everyone shoots is. That's always something tricky to find, because unless you have the formal range, but a lot of gun ranges are just like pistols and maybe some ARs or whatever. Yeah, something that has enough range to shoot a rifle. That's a different kind of property. And so we went out and found a place. I think that I could go out and just get used to shooting that particular rifle, and that's probably the first project. Just to get a feel for that. That shouldn't be too hard. I've taken a long range shooting class before. I mean, it's way mathier than anything that I'll ever get into. But you did the thing with the scopes and the sighting and like the windage and all that. I hope we're not shooting that far. But but that was pretty fun. I actually like that kind of shooting. It's very zen.
I actually I was just recently I went on a 6,000 mile or no, this one was actually an 8,000 mile road trip around the US. I had a conference that I was going to and just kind of kept going. But I stopped, visited some friends in Texas, and they took me out to a Triple C range out in Texas. And a buddy of mine, he's a big gun guy. He works for Cellmark. They make like Sightmark scopes, Pulsar night vision, a lot of awesome gear. And so he's got all the toys. He's got all the connections, all of these like nice high-end, just built to nothing rifles. And so we were out, and I've never really shot past between 600 and 700 yards. I've shot out, I have an M1 Garand that I love shooting. It's my favorite 1939 5-digit serial number. And I still shoot it out to 600 with iron sights. It's an amazing rifle, but that's pretty much the furthest I've ever shot. I shot a little bit further on one of my recent hunts at 625, but he's like, "You've never shot 1,000 yards? Oh, we got to do this." So he took me out and he's like, "You know what? We're going to skip 1,000 yards. We're going to go straight to 1,500. I'm like, "All right." Yeah. So we shot out to 1,500. Then they took me out to a mile. Then they took me out to 2,000 yards. And that's the coolest thing in the world. I mean, like, once again, like probably doing this by myself, the math is, I agree with you. The math is, I struggle with it. I can
really
do the
have to
basic
know what
stuff.
you're doing. Yeah.
I can do the basic stuff, sighting in for, a couple 100 yards, but that far, there's so much more I would need to learn a lot more. But it's the most Zen thing. And it's just that coolest feeling when you hear your spotter, yell that you got contact. I'm like, like, oh, it's a good. I'll have to show you the video at some point. I'll send it over to you or something. But it's such a cool feeling shooting long distance. But yeah, not the most practical. It's good to have the skill, but not the most practical for hunting deer. You're not shooting those at 2,000 yards. At least I hope not. Right. Oh man. So this is your first hunt. What are you looking forward to most about the hunt?
Just like anything else. I mean, we were talking about jiu-jitsu. Sometimes you just have to put the time in. You start out by putting the time in, and that's actually just how I'm looking forward to it. Maybe just because I'm older, and so I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to put the time in and at least do it once. And then we'll do it the next time. And then, maybe I'll get better at it or whatever, or we'll get luckier or whatever. Cause I hear about guys going on hunts so often that they don't get anything. So my expectations are pretty, I'm not assuming that it's going to be glorious, but if it's glorious, that would be great. But, I feel pretty confident in my buddy cause, I've killed things. I kill goats and stuff sometimes out of my land and so forth. So we've skinned things together and so forth. So I'm not
processed
really worried
animals and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I butcher them badly, at home, by myself. I mean, I've done all that, so I'm not super worried about that. Yeah. But I just assume we're going to walk around a lot in the cold, and maybe if we'll get lucky and take a shot and hope I don't screw it up. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Well, you know what? Regardless of whether you even see an animal, I guarantee it'll be glorious. Whether if it's miserable,
excellent, I'll take it.
If it's miserable and grinds you into the dirt, it will still be glorious because
that's true.
You're out with not the biggest tribe, but you're out with your gang. You're out with your tribe, and you're developing those bonds even further. You're experiencing those hardships and that danger. And I mean, you're on public land, and sometimes that can be the Wild West. You never know, man.
All right.
It's it's just crazy. You never know what to expect on public land. A lot of these ranches, it's a lot more of a controlled situation, but especially later in the season, you don't know what, the weather can cause all kinds of stuff. The animals are there. There's other people wandering around in the woods, and you never know if they're doing something stupid or, so it's an exciting experience, man. You can never really know what to expect. You can plan as much as you want, but you will get hit, and you will be all the better for it. So I'm super excited for you on your first hunt, man. So as we're kind of winding down here, one thing I always like to kind of end with, and I kind of want to phrase it in a unique way for you. Say somebody maybe started in on reading one of your books, or even just is aware of who you are and reaches out and says, dude, I'm just an office drone, 9 to 5. Maybe I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know, man. I go to work, I come home, I put my kids to bed, I watch some TV with my wife, go to bed, wake up, do the same thing again. That's my life. I don't really have anything else. Maybe just this whole life isn't for me. What kick in the ass would you give them to motivate them?
Well, if you don't want to wake up from the Matrix, you don't have to. I mean, if nothing's wrong, continue. If nothing's really wrong, continue. But are you saying that nothing's wrong because you're afraid of challenging yourself, or are you saying nothing's wrong and then your wife bosses you around all day and you kind of want to die? Are you really? I don't like the word happiness, because happiness is superficial and transient. But
I always go with fulfilled.
Yeah, fulfilled is much better. Fulfilled is much better word. Are you really fulfilled? Are you going to die with a million regrets of things? Are there a lot of things that you want to try that you're not trying and you've just given up on? And I think that's, if you're answering those questions in a way that would lead you to say, yeah, I should probably be doing something else with my life, then you need to do that. Because you only get the one, and it goes fast. You only get so much time. And so I would say to that guy, yeah, if you're really fulfilled with your life, but a lot of people they stay in that because they've decided, they've accepted a narrative that they're not going to be good at X, Y, and Z. I'm not good at, I had this one bad experience with this thing the one time, and therefore I'll never do that again, or I'll never be good at that. And there's also an idea that if you're not going to be the best, that you shouldn't do it. And let me tell you, I'm going to be 45 this month, and I'm never going to be the best at almost anything. At this point, I'm not. Yeah, I like boxing, and yeah, we like jiu-jitsu, and yeah, I like lifting and all those things, but I'm never going to be the best at any of them. Yeah, I'm not going to the Olympics. I'm not. I could be really, really good, and I could be a lot better than I am now. And that's a lot better than sitting here wishing that just accepting being a fat slob on the couch, and never doing anything with my life, and never getting out there and challenging myself in any way. And I think that, if you got out there and tried some things, like you said, if you get out and go on your hunt and tear your meniscus and have a horrible experience, but you became better for it, you'll feel better about that than you will be like, wow, I am still watching reruns of Friends. You're like, I have been watching reruns of Friends for 15 years, that's, or whatever, if you
at least I'm watching reruns of Sons of Anarchy here. It's a little bit, a little bit better.
Well, there you go. Wishing you're in a motorcycle gang. Well, you probably don't actually wish you're in a motorcycle gang, but there's a lot of people, just watching.
That's such a good point right there. It's such an interesting point, because that alone, I look at these shows I watch and the shows that I really gravitate to. There's some stuff I watch because, it's funny and it's entertaining, sure, whatever. But the shows that I really gravitate, like Sons of Anarchy to this day is probably my favorite series that has ever been. I never rewatch TV shows. But I look at why is that? Is it probably because I felt like there was something missing? And what is that show about? It is about the gang of dudes. Drama. It's male gang drama.
It's about man drama. Is basically what it is. Yeah.
I mean, and those are guys that are masculine dudes. They are good at being men, but not one single one of those dudes is a good man. Just to bring
that is also true.
That point again.
And you know what though, in a good way, as we get through this, is those are also not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I think you have to be honest and admit that being good at being a man, doesn't have anything to do with being a good man, but that doesn't mean you can't be a good man as well.
And they're not mutually exclusive at all.
And I've made that mistake myself in terms of, you end up looking for the dudes who are the best at being men, and sometimes they're just shitty human beings. And, you also have to find, guys who are good guys. And that's who I want to surround myself with in my life. I don't want just, it's good to have the dudes who are just good at being men. They're handy, but, it's better to have men who are good at being men who you can actually trust. Mm-hmm. And that they're going to do the right thing. So that's, I think that's important as well. And, I think that you can balance both.
No, that is super important. I think that's the perfect point to end on. Jack, if people wanted to hunt you down on the interwebs, where can they find you?
I'm very easy to find. My website is jack-donovan.com. And I may or may not start updating that more often. But my main thing is Instagram. You're on Instagram too. I think we have the exact same number of followers. I think I saw that today. I think it's like 25.6. I think is where we're both at as of today. I looked you up and I was so at podcasts.
Oh man, we are exactly.
I know.
Except you're at 666 posts right now. So you better watch out. You might get struck by lightning, and I don't think it's coming from Thor.
I'm having fun playing with that. It's been at 666 for like a month and a half. I just delete one of the old ones.
I was going to say, are you like archiving one and then bringing it up?
Yeah, it's just a good reason to edit the old crap out. You know, I mean, I didn't think of that before I got there, but I was like, we'll just play with this for a while. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, my Instagram is at Start the World. And that's my medium of choice because, as I said, I went to art school and I like to make cool pictures. So that's kind of how I like to introduce my information right now.
I was going to say you have a very definite style on the Instagram page.
Yes.
And I would not, looking at your page, I would not expect you to have been an artist at all. I mean, I can recognize somebody that has good style, but I would not have, expected you to come out and be like, oh yeah, I was an art major. Wait, what?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No,
boy, am I good at Lightroom. Let me tell
you. Hey man, everybody's got their way. You're also the owner of Brutal Company. If you want to just give a quick shout out to that.
Yeah, Brutal Company. That's kind of my t-shirt line, and it's mostly kind of heathen oriented things, but also things that have to do with slogans. Like I said, that slogan I talked about, life is conflict, peace is death. I have a shirt for that. And also the most popular essay I've ever written, the most shared, especially in the gun community, is Violence is Golden. And you can find that if you just Google Jack Donovan, Violence is Golden, it's there. And I have a t-shirt out that says that right now. So that's kind of one of my, that's a perennial thing for me. It's one of those things that keeps on giving. There's some guy who made a meme of some face that's not even mine and has a quote from Violence is Golden at the top of it. And it's been shared so many times. I don't know who made it. I don't know where it came from.
That's
but
crazy.
Thanks, guy.
All right, man. Well, I'll make sure to link to all this on the show notes page. And Jack, thanks so much. I had a blast chatting with you, man.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right, y'all, that'll do it for episode 122 of The Wild Initiative. Big thank you to Jack for taking the time out of his day to hop on a call with me. Make sure y'all check out the show notes page at thewildinitiative.com/122 to get links to everything we talked about in today's episode. Also, make sure you pick up a copy of The Way of Men. Check out Jack's whole series. I think you'll find it to be a really interesting read. Also, y'all, if you are starting a podcast or a brand or you just need a website update, make sure y'all head on over to thewildinitiative.com, click on that media tab, and go check out my website design offerings. And finally, y'all, make sure you head on over to livebearded.com, get entered to win that $10,000, pick up some awesome products, and make sure y'all use code TWI10 for 10% off your order. All right, y'all, that'll do it for today. Looking forward to next week, but in the meantime, I hope this podcast inspired you to get involved, get outdoors, and plan your initiative for the wild.
Thank you for listening to The Wild Initiative. Please take a moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher, and head on over to thewildinitiative.com to get show notes, check out the blog, gear discounts, other podcasts from the Wild Initiative family, and more.